All right, it's recording. Whoops. Okay. It says I can't minimize. Yeah, right. Good morning, everyone. This is Susan Yockey. You are on air with, let me start that over. Good morning, everyone. This is Susan Yockey. A new day with Susan, KGRT, First Montana Internet Radio, and I'm super excited today to be sharing with you one of our own locals. And she has got some really good stuff to share with us today in alignment with what it means to be courageous. And I love what this organization does. I've been familiar with them for several years now, and I really believe that it takes a certain amount of courage for what the children go through in this process of their lives. And it takes courage for this organization and their volunteers to really just step up and to be such a big advocate for the children. So with that said, let me introduce to you, I'm sorry, let me pull my screen up here. Toni Henneman. She is with CASA. She is here with us today to talk about CASA and what they do in the state of Montana. And so I'd just like to give her a big welcome and thank you for the time that you're giving us today. And I'm just can't wait to hear what you've got to share with us. So welcome.
Thank you.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from and what brought you to doing this work?
Yeah, so again, my name is Toni Henneman. I am the volunteer coordinator at the Helena CASA office. I'm originally from Valier, which is a small town in north central Montana. And I've spent the last 8 years in the classroom as a high school English and history teacher, which definitely served me well and I loved it, but I was also ready for a change. So I moved to Helena, and when I saw the CASA job posting, I was really excited because I was familiar with CASA. I tried to become an advocate while I was teaching, but there just weren't enough hours in the day to do both jobs well. So ultimately I wasn't able to become an advocate. So this allows me now to give back to CASA in a different avenue. And I also do the new volunteer trainings. So that way I was able to leverage all my educational background. So I think it's going to be a win-win.
Nice. So I have honestly have never heard of Valier, Montana, and I've been in this state for 27 years. So
Yep.
Is Valier like a really small town? Where is it located at?
Yeah, so Valier is up. We have Lake Francis. It's kind of our claim to fame, I guess, but obviously not that famous. We are north of Choteau. We're an hour and a half north of Great Falls, and then fairly close to Glacier Park. So kind of in the front range of the Rockies is what we call it.
Nice. And you grew up in Montana?
Yes. Yep. Montana native.
Sure. That's great. And I'm sorry, what grade did you say that you taught?
I ended up teaching 8 through 12. So.
Okay, great. So you got with the big kiddos.
I did like the high school kids.
Yeah.
I can deal with the attitude.
Nice. Well, what piqued your interest in CASA in the first place to have you want to be an advocate?
Well, I think that as in many avenues of our world, there's so many people that get kind of forgotten. And I think that so many people live their day-to-day life and don't realize how many children are really placed in bad situations. And I think that there's definitely a need to have some advocates for those children. And I saw firsthand that children that are suffering in their home life or have a lot of chaos going on at home, they're also suffering in school. And to a certain extent, teachers can't solve those problems. And we do need to take it more to the root of the problem and try to help and create more stability for those children. So then they are set up to succeed rather than set up to fail in school. So I think that is definitely related very closely with teaching and education.
Yeah, definitely. So, well, I'm sure that some of the listeners may have never even heard of CASA, and could you share like who is CASA and like when was it founded, why was it founded, and really who do they serve and what's the mission of the organization?
Definitely. I think you hit it right on the head there. I don't know how many people I've told, hey, I'm working for CASA. And they're like, what is that? I mean, really, there's not enough knowledge out there about it.
Yeah.
So we are an acronym. So CASA stands for Court Appointed Special Advocates. And I'll talk about our role and then go back with the history and it will all kind of make sense. So technically, our role is to be advocates for children in abuse and neglect cases. We're supposed to be objective observers, researchers, and reporters. So we're the person that kind of goes out. We want to build relationships with the child, trying to find out his or her story from him or herself. Then we also want to talk to parents, grandparents, any family member we can grab. We'll talk with therapists, counselors, teachers, school administrators, social workers, attorneys. I mean, we are all over the board just trying to figure out what the actual story is. And again, we're able to come from an objective standpoint. Because these cases often are so emotional, it's nice to be able to have us in there that we don't have a dog in the game here. Like all we're fighting for is the kid and his or her best interest. Mm-hmm. And then in the end, we compile all our findings and write reports, which also allows us to give recommendations to the courts. And multiple judges have said that they really do rely on CASA recommendations because, again, we are oftentimes the ones with the most objective standpoint and viewpoint.
Yeah.
So historically, this goes back to 1974. There was a law passed called the Child Abuse Prevention and Treatment Act, which mandated that the courts must appoint a guardian ad litem. Now, I don't want to get into legal jargon too much, but technically for our purposes, guardian ad litem is the same as a CASA. It's an advocate. So in 74, we're mandated, you have to give an advocate for these children. Before that, it was just up to judges' discretion. And while this law had really good intention, as oftentimes happens, the execution really wasn't great because it was actually putting more burden on an already overburdened system within the social work and the judicial system. There just wasn't people to take these roles, and there wasn't funding for it. So late 70s, early 80s, this act really isn't being followed. Flash forward to 1985, and the National CASA organization is born. They are set up as a nonprofit, so that kind of can take the burden of the lack of funding. And then since 1985, it has ballooned. There's CASA offices in all 50 states and really has helped the nation be able to fulfill that 1974 law. And all children are then granted an advocate. Locally here, our office was established in 1998. So looking at the math, that was 20 years ago. We are celebrating our 20th anniversary this year, which I'll talk about more later. And pretty awesome. We can really give the responsibility of building this branch back to one man named Bill Collins. Bill Collins had worked in the child protection field for 30 years, retired and decided that he still wanted to keep giving back. So he built our office and is still an advocate today. He's still on our rolls. He's still taking cases actively. So technically he's been in this field for like 50 years. He's amazing.
Wow.
And in addition to just doing amazing work, he also has put Helena on the map nationally. He served as program director multiple times and then has also been the board chair of the National CASA organization. So Bill Collins is a big name in CASA, and we are very proud and thankful that he calls Helena home and still helps us to a huge degree. Yeah.
Awesome. That's great. So could you share with us, what are some statistics in Montana, like maybe the amount of children that you guys might advocate for? And I bet there's probably a lot of children who don't end up with advocates. What does that look like in the realm of being an advocate and like the statistics of Montana? I don't want to overload you with questions. I just have some are popping up as I'm thinking through the process here. But what are the statistics that you guys go based on in Montana and how you reach and get the support for the children?
Yeah, so nationwide last year, as of October of 2017, the state of Montana saw over 4,000 children in foster care.
Wow.
And in addition to that, there were about 500 children awaiting adoption. So there definitely is a large burden on the system, and we've seen pretty much a steady increase each year. 2017 marked roughly about 400 more children in foster care than 2016. So we do see an escalating problem. Here in Lewis and Clark and Broadwater counties, we saw 126 new cases in 2017. I'm going to throw some numbers out. They will make sense. So 126 new cases. We had 51 active advocates in our office last year. So even with the new cases, that's a huge caseload for 51 people to cover. But that isn't all of our cases, because the average time span for most of these cases are up to 18 months. We have some cases that are going on years. So if you add in the existing ongoing cases, technically we were serving 271 children last year with our 51 advocates.
Wow.
So we really have some rock star advocates who are taking on multiple cases, doing a ton of work. Ideally, we would like to have a ton more advocates. I mean, we have a massive need. Right now, we have 49 children that don't have a CASA in my last tally. So, I mean, and it's just to the point where we can't quite keep up with the need. And sadly, the need has been increasing each year. There's a steady increase. And while I can't prove causation, I think that we can make a correlation between the resurgence in methamphetamine use in our counties. Through the last 3 to 5 years, it has been making a comeback, and kind of with the vengeance. And again, I can't necessarily prove that that's what causes these cases, but most of our cases do involve drug use and abuse. And with the combination of methamphetamine and opioid use that has been increasing, it's pretty hard to ignore that there could be a correlation between the two. So
yeah, okay, that's a high number. I mean, just in the state alone, 4,000 children in foster care. Wow.
Yeah.
You know, and so why would it be critical to have an advocate? How does this help the children exactly? Like, I know, coming from that objective point of view, like, and relating to the child, what does that look like when you are advocating?
Yeah, so I think there's definitely some statistics to prove that children that have CASAs are less likely to go back into the foster system later. Again, we're fighting for that child's best interest. And sometimes it just takes someone that can back away from the time period, you know, what's going on, the turmoil in the family, the emotion. There's a lot of different wants and wishes that are tied up in these cases oftentimes, which may or may not be what that child actually really needs looking forward on a longer timeline. And that's what we CASAs are always trying to do, is like, what can we do to make sure that this child doesn't end up back here? And sometimes, like I say, we are one of the few that actually is looking at that. So
right. So how does that work when you're working? Because I'm sure you guys probably sit in the same room with the parents who are going through the system to work on bringing the children back home. Like, how does that work? Are you so when you're saying you advocate for the child, you're expressing probably the needs and the emotional needs, I would imagine, so that they can put together like a plan that works because I'm sure the mission is to get the child back home if possible. I know some scenarios that's not possible, but with the ultimate goal in mind of bringing the family together, how does that look per se in like a meeting?
well, and technically what we like to do is build relationships outside of like a meeting scenario, if at all possible.
Okay.
So, you know, we'll try to go to the child's home, talk with that child, meet with the parents outside, you know, on a normal quote unquote situation. Sometimes in meetings though, it can get fairly heated. I will say that it's not necessarily our job to set up like treatment plans for parents. That's on the Child Protective Services end. We can, again, kind of make recommendations, say, you know, I think that this parent maybe needs to do some parenting classes or some counseling, or, you know, but again, we aren't in a position to really be demanding that anything happens, but
Yeah.
we can recommend very strongly.
Okay.
So.
Okay. So let's see. How and who are the people advocating for the children?
Yeah, so our advocates come from all sectors of the economy and society. Pretty much anyone that has a dedication and commitment can become a CASA. When we look at our files, we definitely probably have mostly retirees. And the only reason for that is that it does help to have a bit of a flexible schedule. The initial, when you get a new case, it can be kind of time consuming to meet with everybody, make those initial contacts. And then court hearings can vary time-wise. They can get changed, moved back. But that isn't to say that you have to be, a retiree to do this job. We've got a lot of full-time workers that also advocate and do a great, great job. Again, it's that same kind of adage of if you really want to do it, you can probably make it work. So
Yeah. Who do you think tends to advocate more, women or men?
Oh, that's a good question.
I just was thinking, because I know how women are really mothering and we bring that emotional side to things. And I know a man does too, but I was just thinking about, like, I watched this video here just not long ago about a pastor who brought together a community of young boys who didn't have a father, and they weren't showing up to these events that would include a father. And so he reached out to the community and had over 400 people, men, show up to be pretend fathers for these young men to be mentors and stuff. So I just thought that was really powerful, but that would be interesting to know.
And I think probably looking at the files in general, we probably have more women, but there's a good number of men too. And I know a lot of the men have multiple cases. So I don't think that there's really necessarily a good divide in this sector between like who makes the best CASA, I think. And the same thing with the social department, social work. There's a good smattering of men and women. So everything, it just really depends on the person.
Okay. Well, that's cool. So like whether it's a male or a female, how do you guys determine who to assign the children to?
So for the most part, like right now, it kind of just depends on who has some availability. We always will, approach a CASA, say, hey, do you want to take this job? And they have, they can definitely say yes or no.
Yeah.
And, ideally, we try to, set people that might, want to take a case or give them the opportunity. But we've just kind of been in crisis management mode for a while. Just, hey, we got these kids. We need it. Can you take it?
Yeah.
Yes, and then we move on.
Do you have like a screening process for people that you go through?
Yeah, so to become an advocate is a little intense because you are pretty much fulfilling a very demanding and important role. Mm-hmm. So first off, if you want to become an advocate, you would need to fill out an application. It can be found on our website or here at the office. After the application, we'll invite you for an in-person interview. And at that point, we'll ask you to submit to a background check. We try to be very thorough, that we definitely are making sure that the people that we're putting in as advocates have very clean records. And if we determine that you will be a good fit for our program, we then ask you to complete our 30-hour training. Mm-hmm. And training is pretty intense. It covers a lot of areas from laws, Montana law, national law, child protective law, how to conduct interviews well, how to write reports. And then we cover child development, psychology, some poverty, race, mental health statistics. We do throw a lot at an advocate, but the purpose is because, again, it is an intense job and we want to make sure that you have all the skills necessary to go out and be successful. Mm-hmm. So usually training runs over the course of a month. And that's going to be a pretty big, busy month. But again, if you can make it through that, then the hourly requirements really dip down to maybe like around 10 hours a month after that. Mm-hmm. But the training is definitely something that you really need to consider. We really need people to be able to commit to pretty much every training session. So in the end, though, you'll get to go to the courthouse and get sworn in by the judge. So it's a big deal and it needs to be taken seriously. But it does pay off in large dividends, though.
Do they do like a background check and like a criminal history background check?
Yep. We start off with just a blanket CPS background check to start with. And then if they get, they actually sign up for training and we're going to go further, we do a national CASA office does a more intensive background check.
Okay.
So, and again, because it's very important, just like in teaching, I mean, you definitely need to make sure that you've got pretty upstanding citizens that are going to be working with these. So
Yes.
it's a good screening process. And again, sadly, training sometimes does screen people out. But again, you've got to be dedicated and you've got to be committed. So it takes a special person to become a CASA, but I know that there are a lot of those people in our community that could definitely fulfill the role for us. So
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And, and their wife or the children's got to be bigger than, obviously selfish reasons, but,
exactly.
yeah. So, something that I was curious about, throughout my time, I used to do a lot of social justice advocacy work, and, I had taken on advocacy cases on the other perspective from the parents' point of view. And, when I was doing my research, I came across a lot of statistics and facts around there was actually more abuse happening in the foster care system. Do you think that, like, through this relationship building between the child and CAS, and I always feel like I'm saying it wrong, CASA or CASA.
Right. We call it CASA.
CASA.
CASA, yep.
Do you feel like the children, because they're supposed to be in this safe place and sometimes don't always end up in a safe place, do you ever, do you feel like the children share that information? Or, I mean, do you guys see how possibly there's abuse happening even in the foster care system?
Yes, I think that definitely is a fairly common perspective. And I know that abuse in foster care does happen. We are lucky enough here in Helena, we do have really good foster parents, but there are also checks in place. There are systems in place to make sure that abuse isn't happening. And we do play a big role in that, because technically we want to contact that child at least once a month. And ideally we want to go to that child's house. So if they're in foster care, we want to actually go in that home. We try to make sure that we are talking to that child without, a parent or an adult looming over us, because, kids can be coerced.
Yeah.
So we try to take steps to get that make it comfortable so that child can actually tell us the truth if there's something they need to tell us. And in addition, the system is set up, if there is a child in foster care, they have a foster care review committee meeting every 6 months. Okay. So, and at that, pretty much all the stakeholders come, and it is the time to see, is this working well? And social workers are usually really good about making sure that the foster care is going productively. And from my experience, especially we've got some foster parents with very young children, and it's been amazing to see the development gains that these children have attained since being in foster care.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's nationwide. Yeah, foster care abuse is real, and it does happen. And that, I think, is one thing that we are here in Lewis and Clark and Broadwater counties very vigilant of, and we try to make it very tough to become a foster family. Try to keep tabs on that.
Well, I think that's great. Having CASA in there, especially if they're advocating and they're able to go into wherever it is that they're staying, because I would assume that you guys are also trained in, like, the signs of sexual abuse and being, just physical abuse or emotional abuse. But yeah, I just can't imagine going from one abuse to another, the trauma that the children deal with. So,
the training is nice because it does, like you say, it teaches you not just, to take words, but we are going to go into those homes and look at the surroundings. You can really tell sometimes about, how people keep houses and where the child stays and where the child wants to go in the house, where they don't want to go. So there's a lot of nonverbal cues that we're taught to pick up on as well.
That's amazing. So is CASA involved in any of the state or federal policy making?
So here in our office, we're pretty much just set on fulfilling our mission, boots on the ground kind of a thing. But we do have a Montana CASA office, a statewide level office, who works on organization, and then they're the ones that can fight for some policy change if we need. So we can always shout out to the state office if we see some issues or things that we want to change, and they're more equipped to do more of the policy changing or making.
Nice. Do you ever need people to come up and testify, on behalf of some of the bills that you might be working on, or?
I'm not as familiar on that side of the work. I do know that we have had some instances last year where we definitely went and testified in some committee meetings, because again, we are in the legal system. We kind of know what's going on. We can work on both the judicial side and the social work side. So oftentimes it is rare for us to be called, but it can be something that we do. And that's usually what our co-executive director, Pam Young, she is definitely the guru of everything CASA. And she has definitely gone up to the Capitol a few times and has testified and things. She's amazing. So
awesome. Okay. So how is CASA funded?
So we primarily rely on some stable funding through the Montana Supreme Court and then both of the counties that we represent. But then we also get some grant money here and there. And after that, it's private donations. And it seriously is amazing how much support we receive from the Helena and Townsend communities. Each year we have a big fundraiser, which just so happens to be coming up. It's our Light of Hope fundraiser that will be Friday, March 16th. And again, we pretty much just rely on this one fundraiser to get us through the year. So it is important to us. And as I mentioned earlier, we are celebrating our 20th anniversary. So we're trying to kind of pull out all the stops and make it a good one.
Yeah.
And we'll have some performances from the youth choir and also a dance performance from the Creative Arts Center. And we actually also got Governor Steve Bullock to make an appearance and say a few words.
Oh, awesome.
We'll have some silent auction, some live auction items. It'll be a fun, kind of a gala kind of a night. So it should be, if you have an opening this coming Friday, the 16th, definitely put us on your calendar. We would love to see everybody there.
Awesome. So that's the Light of Hope, and it's one of your fundraisers, your big one for the year.
Yes.
And that's on March 16th. What time?
5:30 at the Radisson.
Perfect. And what, do you need to buy tickets or?
Yeah, so you can call the office. We definitely need to kind of get a number for dinner. So you can buy tickets. They're $65 for a place. You can also purchase tables if you have a group. I think that we're doing pretty well on ticket sales, but I do know that we have some spots available.
Okay.
And in addition, if you can't make it to the dinner, we also are running a raffle, which we will draw at the banquet. So you need to go out and get your raffle tickets before Friday the 16th. But we've got $500 to Bob's Valley Market, $500 to Costco. We've got a year membership, Wine of the Month Club from Topper Sellers. So we definitely have some good ticket items on our raffle. And again, you can get those raffle tickets. Yeah, definitely stop by the office. We're at 75 East Lyndale. You can grab a ticket from us. And also Knox Flowers is holding tickets for us as well. So go out this week, buy your ticket. You'll have a pretty good chance to win some pretty awesome items. So
okay, that's awesome. That sounds fun, and some really great generous donations for the organization. So what else do you have coming up that the community could get involved in?
Yeah, so we are looking to start a new volunteer training. So beginning of April, we're going to run a training. This is the first training since 2016. So I am really hoping to have a sellout crowd here. We've got quite a few lined up already, but I'm always can fill it with more. Again, we're going to start training at the beginning of April. It will run through the first week of May. And pretty much if you're interested, you just need to, again, go on the website, get an application, stop by the office, grab an application. You can reach out to me, Toni Henneman, and we'll need to get an application and then an interview done before April 3rd, which is the first day of training. But we've got 3 weeks to get that done. There's definitely some time. And if you can't make this spring training, we are also planning to run one in the fall. So.
Okay, awesome. And for those listeners out there, we will have this posted on my Facebook page, A New Day with Susan, and you can probably find some more information through Toni as well. And yeah, definitely get involved. It sounds like we have like 49 children who could use your role modeling and mentoring and just being an advocate. So one other question. I was wondering, how do you see, well, it might be two. How do you see children being courageous up against everything that they're dealing with through these traumatic experiences?
Oh man, I am always amazed at how much children can go through and still, come out the other side. We've got children that you can't even imagine the situations that they are placed in. We've got, infants to toddlers, everybody. It's incredible the lack of services and love that a child is given, and they can still come out the other side and have a good sense of humor, still joke around. And really, sometimes these kids, it's a day-to-day struggle. They're showing courage getting up in the morning. They're showing courage going to school. Oftentimes they're being bullied at school sometimes. Because on one way to look at it, a lot of times these children are the ones that are totally set up to fail. They're not getting that home support, and then that also then can correlate into problems at school. And it's just a slippery slope downhill sometimes. And it's amazing to see how well some of these kids can come out of these really, really horrendous situations.
Yeah, I bet. How about courage in the advocates?
I am amazed at the advocates sometimes, because you really never know what you're going to run into sometimes. And it does take courage to knock on doors and, hey, I want to talk to your kid. And oftentimes we are going in after a social worker has maybe, kind of shaken things up a little bit. We try to really make it clear, who we are, but still there are some parents that are very, rationally pretty leery of us.
Sure.
And we don't see a lot of issues, like physical violence or anything towards us, but there is always a potential for that. You never know. Mm-hmm. And you've got to always be aware and vigilant with whatever you're doing. And you've also got to be courageous that maybe if you want to make a recommendation that is upset parents, upset family members, but if you know that that is the child's best interest, you've got to stand strong and you've got to back it up and make it clear. So I think it's a day-to-day courageous act that our advocates definitely fulfill.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for the time that you've given my show today, and let's get people down there for the Light of Hope dinner. It sounds like it's going to be yummy and fun, and especially a choir. Who cannot get enough of those? And
kids choir, better.
Kids choir, exactly. They're so cute. And then get your raffle ticket. It sounds like some really great gifts. And like Toni was saying, you definitely, if you have any kind of interest at all, at least call and ask questions. These kids need us. And this is the real deal of a community coming together. It takes a village to raise a family. So would love for you guys to just jump in there and take on the training and see if this is something that you could fulfill your mission on in life. So, and be courageous about it. So thank you so much, listeners, and I will be talking to you some more tomorrow. Have a great day.
Thank you so much.